learning Parashat Chayei. We're going to learn from the Zera Shimshon. And like I said yesterday, even though the parasha is called Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah, there's nothing in this parasha about Sarah besides the beginning of the parasha talking about her death. But right after the parasha starts, there's a business deal, a very expensive real estate transaction that Avraham Avinu buys the cave Ma'arat HaMachpelah, right in the beginning of the parasha, which of course is connected to Sarah because that's where she was buried. But we find an interesting verse right in the beginning of the parasha which says as follows: Hasadeh natati lach, I have given you the field, ve'amara, and the cave that is in it. Ve'amara asher bo. This can be found in our parasha, chapter 23, verse 11. Now comes a lot of questions on just this part of the verse. One of the questions is, איך עפרון חזר בו מדיבורו? If you look at the text, and sometimes it's important to come to the class ready by reading the text, because then you understand what we're talking about. A lot of the times people don't understand what we're talking about because they don't read the text. But I'll tell you very briefly what's going on there. Avraham Avinu comes to a certain individual, Ephron, and he wants Ma'arat HaMachpelah. In the beginning, Ephron tells him, you just take it, it's fine. Later on, we read that he goes back in his offer and he says, okay, I want money. And not just money, 400 shekels, which I think it's equivalent to our generation. It will be something along the line of $40 million. A pretty hefty amount for some little piece of land. I mean, at the time, 400 shekels, I'm just throwing $40 million, but I'm just exaggerating because 400 shekels in that time was something unheard of. But the first question that we bump into, how come this Ephron told him, Avraham Avinu, in the beginning, take the cave or the piece of field, and later on he tells him, no, I want money. Okay. In the beginning, he pretended to be very generous. And don't forget, at the time that Sarah dies, Avraham Avinu is like the one of the richest people in the generation, proved to the entire generation that he's powerful more than Nimrod. Everybody was afraid of Nimrod, and this Avraham Avinu comes and make a joke out of Nimrod. More than that, it was advertised on his resume that when Nimrod threw him into the fire, nothing happened to him. He goes down to Mitzrayim. Paro doesn't want to even deal with him. He has a whole confrontation with Elimelech, one of the greatest leaders. He's afraid of him. I mean, everywhere Avraham Avinu goes, everybody's, don't deal with this guy. Then, of course, the famous story when they kidnap Lot, Avraham Avinu goes out, fights 4 kings. It's almost like me going out with my servant and fighting the army of China, the army of Iran, the army of Russia, and the army of America all together. That's more or less the level of the war that Avraham Avinu had, and he destroyed them. So, of course, everybody had fear to him, had respect to him. He wasn't some regular individual. But nevertheless, this Ephron came and wanted to show respect and honor to Avraham Avinu. He says, you can take the field for free. It will be my honor. So first he showed him that he's generous, but nevertheless he says, you know what? I know you're worth a few $1 billion. I want money for that. Okay, so our sages have said in the beginning he wanted to give it to him as a present. Now, of course, you have to go and read through the text, because in the beginning it says that Avraham Avinu went to the sons of Chet, Bnei Chet, and he first talked with them, and they said, it's okay, you can buy the real estate. And then he says, okay, now connect me to the one who owns the real estate, Ephron, and I'll buy directly from him. So some of the commentary says, no, Ephron wanted to give Avraham Avinu the field because he says, you know what, he's mourning, he's sad, his wife died, I think that he's going through some type of a hardship. I want to give him the field as a present. But nevertheless, he wanted to show, like as if he's in the eyes of the sons of Chet, that they're like as if he's courteous and charitable and he's giving the present to Avraham Avinu. But nevertheless, later on he flips over and says, no, I want money for that. So most of the commentaries don't accept this specific commentary, that he wanted to give it to him because he felt bad for him and so forth. But he says as follows: Ze haterutz lo yitachen. We don't buy this excuse. She'im ken haya lo laAvraham niten hakesef betzni'ah. Why we don't buy this excuse? Because if Avraham Avinu did not want to make a whole geshrai out of it, as they call it, to make a whole ordeal out of it, so that Avraham Avinu could come to Chet and to Ephron and tell him, listen, I'm just going to give you the money quietly. You know, nowadays somebody buys a big building, the next day the whole city knows, he bought that building, within 2 minutes everybody knows what you buy, what you didn't buy. So why does the explanation is not acceptable? That Avraham Avinu, that Bnei Chet wanted to, would see that Ephron is giving it for free, and so forth, and that he's so charitable and all this. Why is it not acceptable? Because it says if Avraham Avinu didn't want to make a whole issue out of it, that one would look at the other and say, why is he doing it, why is he not doing it? Avraham Avinu could have said to Ephron straight out, listen, I want to buy it, let's not make a big deal of it, I'll give you the money quietly. But on the contrary, what did we find? That Avraham Avinu publicly and in front of all the cameras, so to say, gave him the money. So Avraham Avinu chose to give the money out in the open. Kedichtiv, where do we learn that from? It says in the Torah, Vayishkol Avraham le'Ephron et hakesef. Avraham came with the money and waited, because at the time there wasn't really a currency, it went by weight. And he waited in front of anybody. Asher diber be'oznei bnei Chet, which means that the sons of Chet were present at the time of the transaction when Avraham Avinu gave the money to Ephron. Saying, in other words, I want witnesses, I want everybody to see that I gave the money. Meaning that Bnei Chet already knew about the money. The first commentary says that in the beginning, Ephron says, I don't want money, because he didn't want, so to say, Bnei Chet to hear that there's some money transaction here. Maybe they were mafia. Maybe they said, Avraham Avinu gave you money, we want a commission. Like in our days, you have a realtor, and the person buys a building, and the realtor says, listen, I showed you the property, I want a percentage. So the first explanation, what we said, that Ephron kind of didn't want Bnei Chet to figure out that there's a money transaction. Maybe he didn't want to pay a fee or whatever it is, so he pretended like as if Avraham Avinu is in a state of despair or sadness and he's willing to give it. But that's not acceptable, because we see that clearly Avraham Avinu comes with the money and he doesn't care if the sons of Chet will see and know about this transaction. So obviously, and if Avraham Avinu wouldn't want that to be obvious, then Avraham Avinu would right away tell Ephron, listen, I'm just giving you the money quietly. Nobody needs to know about this deal. But obviously the text says clear that Avraham Avinu came with the money and says, here, wait, I'm giving it to him. And obviously the Bnei Chet, the sons of Chet, knew about this transaction, about this deal. And not only that, ואף על פי שתירוצם נותן טעם לשבח, but nevertheless that the excuse kind of sounds noble. He didn't want to embarrass anybody and so forth. שאם אברהם אבינו היה רוצה לקח שדה עפרון, היה לו לקח לעפרון. But nevertheless, if Avraham Avinu wanted to do it quietly, he would go directly to Ephron. Why do you have to go to Bnei Chet? Now, to kind of explain it's not so clear in the Torah, but I think the hierarchy was that Bnei Chet were kind of controlling the area. It's kind of hard, like in Israel, when you buy a property, there's the registration organization. It's called Tabo. And they just want to oversee who owns what. But nevertheless, Avraham Avinu had to go to Ephron, who actually owned that piece of land. But it seems like kind of in the beginning, like maybe that's the false excuse that doesn't make sense, that kind of Avraham and Ephron were trying to go behind the scenes to make the deal. That's why Ephron, so to say, I'll give it for free. And then when he flipped, What's the explanation? Well, of course, Avraham Avinu didn't want to hide this transaction. If Avraham Avinu wanted to hide the transaction, then he would tell a phone, listen, I'm just going to come at night and give you an envelope full of cash. Shh. We don't need anybody hearing about this transaction. On the contrary, Avraham Avinu says, no. We're doing this transaction in front of everybody. And that explains why Avraham Avinu first went to the sons of Chet, then he went to Ephron. Obviously, Avraham Avinu wanted the sons of Chet to know about this transaction. Kedei likach reshutam, to get their permission, veda'atam, and that they should know that there's going to be this transaction. And before he went to Ephron, it's almost like as if, I'm kind of seeing it, that the sons of Chet were the mafia. They were controlling the territory, and he had to get permission from them to do a business transaction in their territory. Not that Avraham Avinu is afraid of anybody, but kind of Avraham Avinu had some type of respect and honor to the sons of Chet and saying, listen, I'm about to do a business transaction in your territory. I'm going to Ephron to buy from him the land. I want your consent. Okay, you got it. This is kind of how it seems what was going on there. Why? כדי שלא יוכלו מחר לטעון את השדה, דין הדבר מצרה. That they should not come later on, the sons of Chet, and try to sue whether Ephron or Avraham Avinu, give us back this piece of land. You know what? Ephron gave it to you because you were mourning and he didn't have where to bury and you were sad and upset and depressed and he just gave it to you. We don't want this transaction. We're suing you. So obviously Avraham Avinu says, I want this whole transaction to be out in the open and I want to get your consent. You're going to shake my hand and you're not going to come later on and sue me that I did this transaction behind your back. Michol makom, but nevertheless, עדיין קושייה ראשונה במקומה עומדת. But we still have the same question that we presented in the beginning. Why did Ephron in the beginning said, I'll give it for free? And later on he says, okay, no, I want money, and a lot. שאם כבר נתנו לו רשות לקנות, because if בני חת gave permission to Avraham Avinu to buy, אין עוד צורך שאפרון יאמר להתנה לו במתנה. Then Ephron doesn't have to say, I'll give it to you as a present, because he already got the consent from the sons of Chet that Avraham Avinu was allowed to. This is one question that we want to understand what's going on in the story. Now again, just to tell you what usually happens with most people read the parasha, they zoom through it, they didn't even notice that there's some type of a real estate transaction here that seems a little bit odd. Why does Avraham Avinu, I'm just going to clarify that, why does Avraham Avinu go to Bnei Chet to tell them he's about to do a business transaction and he wants to buy a certain land, and then he kind of tells them, okay, who owns the land? Oh, Ephron? Oh, I'm going to Ephron. Just go straight to Ephron, buy the piece of land. Avraham Avinu needs to give some type of an account to Bnei Chet. Why is the Torah telling me this? If the Torah is telling me this, must be that there's some type of a hidden message to me. And we're not looking into mystical Kabbalah behind it. I need a message. Because when I read the Torah is not a history book, as I mentioned hundreds of times. The Torah is a book to teach me how to conduct myself in this world. So it must be some type of message in these few verses. Now we have another question. Mahu vayakum sde Ephron. It says in our parasha, in chapter 23, verse 17, Ephron was the owner of the field. It says vayakum sde Ephron. The field was established. It's a piece of field. What was established there? And it says, Rashi says, Tkuma hayta lo. One way of explaining it means that the value of the property went up. Now imagine now you have like a bad area or some area that doesn't have much value, and somebody famous moves into that neighborhood. Whoop, the property value goes up. It happened many times in the United States, to complete opposite, that there would be, especially in big cities like New York, there would be an area that had a high value, and when the Jews would move in there, the religious Jews, the value would drop down. or in other places, if a certain ethnic would move there, the value of the property goes down. So here, one commentary says, no, the value went up. Avraham Avinu became a resident. Ooh, Avraham Avinu lives in the neighborhood. Ooh. So I think, where is it that Bill Gates and Trump, they have a house there right next to each other, and somewhere in South Florida, whatever it is. So, the President of the United States lives there, has a house there. What's his name? Gates has maybe the property value goes up there. So when it says in the Torah, Vayakom Sde Ephron, that the property of Ephron, the value went up. Okay. This is one explanation. Therefore we'll see how it's all connected. Ve'od shemipshat hakatuv, and also what we can understand from the text, נראה שאברהם אבינו קנה את השדה מאת בני חת, ולא כאמר מעפרון. If you're really looking at the text, you know what you can derive from the whole thing? That Avraham Avinu actually bought the property from the sons of Chet and not from Ephron. Where do we see that? I mean, you don't have to be a genius here. Go to chapter 25, verse 10. In our parasha, it says, השדה אשר קנה אברהם מאת בני חת. The field that Avraham bought from the sons of Chet. שמה קבר אברהם ושרה אשתו. That's where Avraham Avinu is buried, and his wife Sarah. So we see from the next verse that Avraham Avinu actually bought the field from Chet, from the sons of Chet. Why are you taking me all this whole journey that he's buying it from Ephron? Not only that, we can find also in Parashat Vayechi, you can find it in chapter 49, verse 30, where it says that Avraham Avinu bought the field from Ephron. What does it say? In chapter 49, verse 30, Asher kana Avraham et hasadeh me'et Ephron hachiti. That Avraham Avinu bought the field from Ephron, from the land of the Chiti. Ve'lama, now comes here another question, by the way. Let's listen to where it gets tangled. Maybe there's a conspiracy theory behind it. That's my jokes, of course. It says here another question. Lama lo katav hachakra vayikan Avraham et hasadeh me'et Ephron bekesef 400 shekel. Why doesn't it say that Avraham Avinu actually purchased the field for 400 shekels? Why is it comparing it? Because Avraham Avinu bought with money what is now called Hebron. We own it. Arabs cannot come and say, no, it's our land. Sorry to tell you. Avraham Avinu 4,000 years had bought it. We own it. So Avraham Avinu bought Kiryat Arba, Hebron, the cave. So David HaMelech bought the land where Bet HaMikdash is built on. This can be found in the book of Shmuel, the second Shmuel, Shmuel Bet, chapter 24, verse 24. And what does it say? Vayikan David et Agoren, bekesef shekalim 50. David, HaMelech, King David, bought the property, the field, with 50 shekalim. Just comes to, again, to put you in proportions, how much was the field that Avraham Avinu bought. 400 shekalim. And almost more than 1,000 years later, David HaMelech brought where the Bet HaMikdash is going to be for 50 shekalim, which is also an exorbitant amount. But nevertheless, it says that David HaMelech purchased it, and when it comes to Avraham Avinu, it doesn't say the word purchase. It says, Vayishkol Avraham le'Ephron. He weighed the money. He didn't purchase. He just says he weighs the money. Nir'ah shelo kederech kniya natanam lo. It seems that not in a way of a purchase that Avraham Avinu gave it to him. So, we're presented here with a bunch of questions that are not so clear. What's going on here? On one hand, we have Ephron saying, I don't want money. Take it for free. Then he changes his mind. Give me 400 shekels. Then we have another question here. How come it be that the text clearly says later on that Avraham Avinu bought it from Bnei Chet, not from Ephron? Then we have another question. How come it says that he weighed the money and not saying the word purchase? There must be some type of a message here. So it says here something very interesting. He quotes a Talmud, a Gemara from Tractate Kiddushin, page 59b, 59a, and it says about a certain transaction that was between a few of the Tanaim, and there was an option of option of getting the land for free, and the rabbi said, no, the the sages, I want to purchase it. And when he was questioned, why don't you want to get this land? I'm giving it to you for free. What did he answer? Soneh matanot yichyeh. A person that hates presents or gifts should live a long life. And up until today, this is a term, this is not only a term, but rather an attitude. I don't need favors. I will pay. And again, this is called in Hebrew, and this is quoting a Tana from Tractate Kiddushin. In the Talmud says, Soneh matanot yichyeh. One time I was, I have it many times, but not too long ago, I was in one of my tours. I went to some restaurant to buy food. The guy recognized me, and when I came to pay the bill, he's like, no, you take it, it's free. For you, it's free. I said, I don't want it free. I want to pay for my food. No, it's my honor, I want to invite you. I said, I don't want you to invite me. I told him, I don't need you to pay for my food. I don't want you to pay for my food. Tell me what's my bill, I'll pay for it. Now it says as follows. The same way happened with Avraham Avinu and Ephron. Mitchila, Ephron amar laAvraham belashon matana. In the beginning, Ephron told Avraham Avinu, take it. Alai, present. Mishum delo ratza limkor, he didn't want to sell it to Avraham Avinu. Why? Because it was Avraham Avinu, a celebrity, a great individual, says, no, I don't want any money for it. But later on, כששמע שאברהם היה שונא מתנות, when he heard that Avraham Avinu hates presents, והוא לא היה רוצה במחר, and he would not accept it but with purchasing, אמר לו, ארץ 400 שקל, so give me 400 shekels. You are, how do you say, insisting? No problem, then I want 400 shekels. רמז לו, he gave him a hint here, ששווי הקרקע כדאי שייתן לו אברהם לא בתורת מקח ובמחר רק להינצל מניעות דשונא מתנות יחיה. He wanted to tell him this is no value to this land. There's no value to this field. He wanted to tell him that the value of what he's buying is not by negotiating here. Because Avraham Avinu would say, oh, this is property, can be worth so much. The property is maybe worth 5 shekels. Why you want 400 shekels? And then they would argue, give me 5, I want 4, give me this, and so forth. So Ephron threw an exorbitant amount to hint him, it has nothing to do here with a business transaction and negotiating. It has to do with the fact that you don't want to get something for free. וכן עשה אברהם. And on the same level, Avraham Avinu did the same thing. שלא נתן לו אדמים בשווי הקרקע. Avraham Avinu didn't tell him, 400 shekels? It's worth maybe a shekel. I'll give you a shekel and get out of here. Avraham Avinu says, I accept this method. I will give you an amount that has nothing to do with the value, just that I will not accept it for free. רק כמו מתנה אחרת תמונת הקרקע. I don't want a gift that you giving me the field, the land, as a present. ומשום הכי, because of that, לא כתב כאן בעת הקנייה שעפרון מכר את השדה. That's why he doesn't say that there was a purchase there, because there wasn't really a normal real estate transaction. If it would be a normal real estate transaction, and Avraham Avinu would say, how much? 10 shekels. That's really the value. You know what Avraham Avinu would do? He would bring an appraiser. Give me an appraisal for the property. The appraiser will say, okay, I think it's worth maybe, in a good market, 5 shekels. So Avraham Avinu would come and be like, okay, I'm a merchant. I'm not going to give you 5 shekels. I'll give you 3.9. No, I want 5.9. No, I'll give you 4.1. And they would be negotiating. Because Avraham Avinu was not willing to get a gift. Ephron understood that Avraham Avinu was not interested in getting a gift. So Ephron threw an exorbitant amount to make it obvious that there's no transaction here. Avraham Avinu said, good, I accept. I will pay the money. Therefore, it says in the text clearly that Avraham Avinu weighed the money and not purchased the land. To emphasize that there was no transaction here. Rather, Avraham Avinu didn't want to accept the present. ולפי שמיד שעפרון נתנה במתנה, and right away that Ephron accepted, לאברהם סילק ידיו ממנה, right when Ephron gave it in the beginning as a present, and Avraham Avinu says, no presents. וכשאברהם לא רצה לקבלה, לא זכה בה, then when Avraham Avinu refused to get it, which means that he didn't gain it or won it. והייתה נשארת הפקר. Now, if Avraham Avinu would accept the present, the status of it legally, according to the Torah, would be that the land is hefker, meaning it doesn't belong to really anyone. Now, what would be the result from that? That Bnei Chet could have put their hand on it and say, listen, it's not really yours, because he gave it to you as a present. We don't think that Ephron has the power of giving you as a present. It has to be a transaction. So Avraham Avinu already knew that if there's not going to be any financial transaction here, Bnei Chet can come later and say, this is hefker. It belongs to anybody. Give it back to us. We don't agree to this deal. But nevertheless, it says that Avraham Avinu kena'a mibnei Chet kshenatan hakesef leEphron. When Avraham Avinu gave the money to Ephron, it's like as if he did a financial transaction and like as if he bought it from Bnei Chet, because they gave their consent. If Avraham Avinu would tell Ephron, give it to me for free, I'm accepting, later on, Bnei Chet could come and say, we don't agree, it was given for free, give it back, it belongs to us. We manage the property, the area here. So by the fact that Avraham Avinu went to Bnei Chet, the sons of Chet, they approved the transaction. He went to Ephron. He didn't accept it as a present. He gave money. So by that, like as if the purchase was done, so the Torah comes and says that Avraham Avinu bought it from the Bnei Chet and not from Ephron, because they approved it. And again, I'm telling my way of explaining it, that I see that Bnei Chet was the mafia. And since Avraham Avinu, and there was no bribery here, but since Avraham Avinu, so to say, got the okay from the mafia, so the text says he bought it from Bnei Chet, but really he gave the money to Ephron, who was the owner of the land. But the mafia said it's okay, we approve this transaction. Since Avraham Avinu didn't want to get it for free, had to be some type of a transaction with money here. And therefore, mishum hachikti vekam asadeh, and that's why I said that the property value went up, because Avraham Avinu made a business transaction. You know why? Because now all the realtors in the area, when they came to sell properties, they said, you know how much that property just sold for? 400 shekels. So the whole area, the property value went up. So that's why the text says that the value of the field went up. Demimele kam birshuto shel Avraham, because in the merit of Avraham Avinu, by giving money to Ephron, the value went up. And not only that, יש עוד לומר שלפי שבני חטא היו יכולים לערער, because בני חטא could have say objection, we don't want to give the field, we are objecting. מטעם בר מצרה, why would the בני חטא will have the objection? Because let's say the whole transaction would be for free. What did the Ephron said? I'm willing to give Avraham Avinu the land for free, because look at him, look at this poor guy mourning the death of his love of his life. He's sad, he's depressed. I want to cheer him up. Here is a piece of land. So the sons of Chet can say, objection, this is not a valid reason to give a piece of land. What are you trying to bypass our authority? They could have easily objected for that. נקרא שאברהם קנה את השדה בני חטא. So by the fact that Avraham Avinu said, listen, I'm not getting anything for free, I'm buying it. Whether Bnei Chet got a commission on that, it's irrelevant. But he went to Bnei Chet and got their consent. Now they can't come later on and say, objection, we never approved it. You know why Avraham Avinu was so smart? This is a side note, this is not what the text is saying. Because now, 4,000 years later, everybody's coming and saying, who says it belongs to you? Get out of here. We can come and say, what are you talking about? Avraham Avinu bought it. Nobody can come and say, no, objection. The Palestinians come now and say, this belongs to us. Hebron belongs to us. Kiryat Arba belongs to us. The grave here, Marat HaMachpelah. Sorry to tell you, Avraham Avinu got the consent of Bnei Chet. He weighed money. He bought it. It's ours. End of story. It's legally ours. So nevertheless, that's why the text is saying that Avraham Avinu, so to say, bought it from Bnei Chet. He didn't give them the money. He got their consent. And that's why the text doesn't say that he bought it from Ephron. Lefi shegam mehem lekacha. Because the fact that he took it away from Bnei Chet. De'i lav achi en kinyano me'Ephron klum. Even though really he bought it from Ephron, but he took it from Bnei Chet. Umeshum shelefi ha'emet Ephron lo silek yadav mimena. Really, according to the truth, Ephron gave the land and took the money. Ela kedei sheyizkeh ba'Avraham. And only that Avraham Avinu should have possession over the land. ועוד שקיבל הכסף תמורתה, and on top of that, Ephron got money for that. כתב קרא, the text says, in Parashat Vayechi, שקנה מאפרון. That later on, in Parashat Vayechi, it says that he bought it from Ephron. So kind of it's settling the text, that we're not going to have questions, did he bought it from Bnei Chet, or did he buy it from Ephron? Really, he bought it from Ephron. The money went to Ephron. Avraham Avinu didn't want a present. Don't do me any favors. I don't need you coming to me later on and says I gave you a present. And of course, he needed to get the consent from Bnei Chet that he's not going around them. Everybody was happy. Nobody can come and say objection. Now we can understand what it says in the Midrash in Bereshit Rabbah. Chapter 59, verse 9. It says in the verse, V'achrei chen, after this transaction. Can you imagine? This is almost, you can say, one of the deals of the, not the deals of the century, the deals of this entire planet. Avraham Avinu buying Marat HaMachpelah. This is the gate to the heavens, Marat HaMachpelah. You know, all the souls, when they die, have to go up to Shamayim, to the heavens, through Marat HaMachpelah. Adam HaRishon and Chava are buried there. Avram and Sarah. Later on we're going to read that Yitzchak and Rivka. Later on Yaakov and Leah and so forth. But nevertheless, it says, Ve'achrei chen, after this whole transaction, Ken kavar Avraham et Sarah. Avraham finally went and buried Sarah. So what do we learn from this verse? What does the Midrash says? The conclusion, Hadahu dichtiv. What does it mean? Rodef tzedakah v'chesed, yimtza chaim tzedakah v'chavod. If you pursue charity, righteousness, and kindness, you will find life, charity, and honor. Rodef tzedakah, who's the one who's pursuing charity? That's Avraham Avinu. V'shamaro derech Hashem, and all his existence was to do charity to the name of Hashem. V'chesed, and kindness that he did to many other people, and the ultimate kindness, chesed, that he did, you know, to who? To Sarah, that he buried her. This is the ultimate gmilut chasadim, by the way. Gmilut chasadim is acts of kindness. You know what's the ultimate gmilut chasadim a person can do? Is to bury somebody. Because that person can pay you, the person can thank you, and needless to say that you are taking care of their body, which affects them to eternity. What is going to be the result? The Midrash says, Yimtza chaim, you will find life, good life in this world, eternal life in the world to come. Ushnei Chayei Avraham, and these are the two types of life that Avraham Avinu merited. A long life and a good life in this world, and a life of eternity in the world to come. Now the Zera Shimshon continues, and he goes in more in depth, and this siman, which by the way I forgot to mention in the beginning, we're reading from siman Hey. Siman means the part that we're learning from, number 5. But we're going to conclude here by taking this series of questions. First of all, we answered the basic questions. Why did Ephron say in the beginning yes and then no? And we answered the question, why does it say in the beginning that he bought it from Ephron? Then it says in a different place, he bought it from Bnei Chet, and then it concludes, it says he bought it from Ephron. We answered all these questions. This is just to fulfill our curiosity about the text. I know a lot of people, they don't really stop to really question every little thing that happens in the text. There are some people, when they read the Chumash, every verse, they stop and ask 10 questions. Why does it say this? Why does it say that? 10 verses after, it says something different. In this Parashat, it contradicts. That's really the way of learning Torah, by the way. It's not, most people, they learn Torah, they zoom through the text. Okay, thank you very much. I should close the book. Okay, I got the point. You didn't get any point because you didn't ask any questions. If you read the Parashat and you don't ask questions, something's wrong here. You have to ask questions because really when you read the text, I don't want to say chas v'shalom anything bad about the Torah, but nothing makes sense. If it made sense to you, you didn't read it well. If nothing makes sense and you have questions, now let me answer you. So on the surface, we answered all the questions. But what is the message that I'm getting here? If the Torah chooses, Avraham Avinu lived 175 years. You know how many stories we can read about Avraham Avinu? So which stories do we read? That he left Haran and Ur Kasdim, that he went down to Mitzrayim, that he had an encounter with Avimelech because Sarah was abducted, the Akedah, that he went to sacrifice Yitzchak, the war that he had with the four kings, the time that he had an encounter with the angels, the three angels, the time that he went to negotiate on behalf of Sodom. I mean, there's a lot of stories about Avraham Avinu. Probably the most stories that any individual in the Torah has, even though Moshe Rabbeinu is really the main character in the Torah, but we don't have stories about Moshe Rabbeinu, by the way. Moshe Rabbeinu, we have all the encounters of him talking with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, bringing the Torah, the encounters with Paro. So I would say that maybe Paro, Avraham Avinu, and Moshe are the two characters in the Torah that we have most information about them. But from 175 years of Avraham Avinu, what do we have? A dozen stories that I just mentioned now and a few others. But if the Torah is going out of its way to find in its precious limited amount of letters to tell me about this business transaction, is to tell me a very strong message, and I will take it into two messages. The text of the Zera Shimshon is telling us, Soneh matanot yichyeh. Don't accept bribery. He doesn't using the word bribery. He's saying matanot, a present. Don't accept presents. Of course, I'm not talking about your birthday when somebody wants to buy you a birthday. But if you're somebody or something, better pay for your meal, pay for your ride. Don't accept constantly. Some people, that's what they live off. And it says soneh matanot. It doesn't say don't accept the present. It says hates presents. And not a present on your birthday when you get a present from your friend, your wife, your kid. I'm not talking about that. When people is doing you favors. So it says soneh matanot yichyeh. Why does it say the word yichyeh, will live? Because when a person is in a motion of taking, I'm not talking again, don't think I'm talking about a birthday present. I'm talking about when a person takes. Can you take me for a ride? Can you do this for me? Can you help me here and there? Can you give me a free meal? Now, if a person is unfortunately poor, doesn't have means and ability, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about that some people, their motion is to take. You have to look a little bit beyond the text. Not the present per se, is the motion of taking. How can I use you? This is when, you want to go to the depth of the teachings of the Talmud, is the motion of how can I use you? How can you do something for me? Now when you pay for that, listen, I paid. Oh, I paid. Through the nose I paid. In many cases, a lot of people ask and question, how come you have to pay for this? How come you have to pay for that? Why is this so expensive? You know why? Because when you pay a lot, you appreciate what you got. And sometimes you have to pay. A lot of people question, why does a Sefer Torah has to cost so much money? A person sat there for months and wrote it. And the whole process. Yeah, but a lot of people claim the Torah should be for free. Well, the rabbi doesn't have to eat. The shul doesn't have to sustain itself. Some people say, why did the shul takes money? Well, they have to pay the mortgage or the rent or the electricity bill. And some people ask, why does the rabbi charges? Well, the rabbi needs to eat too, by the way. What do you think, that the ferry comes and puts a check in his bank account? Some people question, why does the rabbi take money? to marry somebody off. You know, the only time when a rabbi is not allowed to ask for money is for a brit milah, for circumcision. And if the rabbi is asking for money for circumcision, something's wrong there. Listen, I have 4 boys. Every time that I had a mohel, I would tell him, if I would ask, how much is your fee? I have no fee. You want to give something? Give. But I'm not allowed to do it. It's a mitzvah. But sometimes you bring a rabbi to officiate a wedding. And some rabbis cost a lot of money. And people say, why does he take money? He's a rabbi. Well, he needs to feed himself. Besides, if you get him for free, well, you're not going to appreciate anything. So I'm sidetracking that right now. But the point, what I'm trying to say is that some people, their motion is, how can I use you? How can I get something out of you? Why is it costing me? But when you pay for something, you said, well, I paid. I own it. I don't need any gifts. I don't need any favors. I worked for it. I owned it. So when the Talmud says, Soneh matanot yichyeh, a person who hates gifts should live a long life, you know what it's saying in other words? If your motion is to give and not to take, like Avraham Avinu, then you're going to gain a long life. Because Avraham Avinu was not a taker. Avraham Avinu was a giver. He constantly looked how to do charity. He constantly looked how to do acts of kindness. Gmilut chasadim. So what did he gain? Long and good life in this world and eternal life in the world to come. So our sages come and say, you want to gain life? Don't be in a motion of how can I get something out of you. Of course, it's using it by saying you should hate presents. And again, I'm repeating myself over and over. This is not a birthday present. Don't come now to your mom and say, Mom, I don't want a present. Yeah, but it's your birthday. No, I am not accepting a present. That's not what I'm saying. You should accept presents from your loved ones for an engagement, for a wedding, for a birthday. The present means that you have to use it in a little bit more of a out-of-the-box way, that I can come to you and say, how can I use you? And by the way, that's the motion of many people. How can I use this guy? What can this guy do for me? And I'm excluding now people, a person that is poor and says, I have nothing to eat. Can you help me with food? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people that there are users, and at the end of the day, each and every one of us has in one way or another the motion of how can I get something out of you? And it can be money, it can be a favor, you know, person in a place where I need something to be done. But either way, you're looking at it, each and every one of us possesses himself some type of this quality that in any type of an encounter that I have is that what is in it for me? What is this guy giving me? What am I gaining from here? I'm giving so much. What am I getting? Avraham Avinu never asked for that. Avraham Avinu says, I'm willing to pay for the field, and a lot. Because that's not my motion. It's not about the transaction. It's not about the money. It's about Avraham Avinu never having the motion of taking. He was also always in the motion of giving. And it's unbelievable how the Kadosh Baruch Hu always organizes the order of the classes that we have. It's not that I sit by the way in planning the schedule. The class before this class we learned Tomer Dvorah. Well, how did we conclude the last class with Tomer Dvorah? It's all about you looking how you can give to another person, and that's how you resemble the Master of the universe. And B'Hashgacha Pradit in Divine Providence in this class we're learning that Avraham Avinu's motion was just to give. How can I do good for you? How can I help you? How can I do your life better? How can I make your situation better and easier? And what did he gain? Life in this world, a good life, long, healthy, prosperous life, and a life in the world to come. Only because of Gemilut Chasadim, and Gemilut Chasadim is going out of your way to do good for somebody else. And therefore Avraham Avinu was refusing to get the field for free. It was not the money. It has nothing to do with the money. He had the money coming out of his nose, Avraham Avinu. It's the motion. And what we want to take from that is where can I do good to you, and not where can you do good to me. Or where can I use you? Or where can I gain something for you? Or what is in it for me? You have to reverse the entire way of your outlook, and in any encounter, the question that has to come up into your mind, how can I make this person's life better today? How can I make your situation smoother, easier? How can I help you? You live in this way of life, I can guarantee to you that you're going to gain life, good life in this world, and an amazing life in the world to come.